In the auto recycling industry, there are certain engines that you just can't buy enough of. You can't inventory them fast enough because they don't sit on your shelf. You can't charge too much for them because you can never satisfy the demand. And usually engines like that come with a very hefty core charge, which is what the core suppliers and rebuilders are willing to pay for them. And usually that indicates that they are in short supply and high demand. But why? Is it that they only made a few of them? Is it that most of the cores look like this? It's this in this case. This is an L86 out of a 2014 Cadillac Escalade. This is the core engine. So unfortunately, I don't have a VIN on this engine. GM doesn't put VINs on engines, and I can't look up how many miles were on this vehicle, but it's pretty blown up. But why did it blow up? The L86 is a 6.2-liter all-aluminum pushrod V8. This is a Gen 5 LT architecture engine, which is almost the same as what's in Corvettes and Camaros of the time. This replaced the Gen 4 6.2-liter engines, which is LS architecture for the 2014 model year. Now, these engines are pretty different than the Gen 4 engines. GM added some upgrades to these engines, like direct injection and variable oil pumps. I don't know that I would call those upgrades. However, all of the work that they did to those engines produced 17 more horsepower. 17 horsepower. They are a lot better on fuel. They're just not as good on engine blocks, apparently. The very first thing I do when I see an engine that someone has added an inspection port to is think, does it turn over? Well, let's find out. It doesn't feel wonderful. I don't think I'm fighting compression. Let's keep going. Oh, hey, that felt like compression, and it's hissing at me. I think we're okay here. It's a flesh wound. Now it's time to pull the plugs.
Oh.
Well, we have 7 plugs that look all right. And the 8th plug, the front cylinder on the driver's bank or left-hand bank, has been mutilated. This is not how to properly gap a spark plug, but the piston thought that's how you're supposed to do it. And that is a very good indicator that we're going to find some malice in the combustion palace today. I think we can kiss this bank's head goodbye. That sounded weird. It's time to pull some covers off. That was hard. Before I pull the intake manifold off, I wanted to take a look inside and show you that it is not good in here. What you're looking at is not pixie dust. It's forbidden glitter. And the intake is not supposed to have any type of glitter, forbidden or not. Now, I can tell you that this intake has been off before because obviously they replaced an engine. So there's only a couple bolts holding this in, so let's get that removed next. Should just lift right off. Well, someone left us some gifts here. We got a pin and a bolt. I was hoping for a 10 millimeter. Let's take a peek at these intake ports. This is the right-hand bank, and it's dirty. You'll never catch an LS engine looking this way. That's DI for you. Wow, look at that. Lots of buildup, but no metal yet. Well, I see some problems. This is the front cylinder on the passenger bank, the one with the mutilated spark plug, or driver's bank rather. That's not good. That valve is bent. That one might be okay. Look at the amount of buildup as you get towards the back of the engine. Jeez. Now I'm going to take a minute and clear some of the external parts off the engine. We're going to start with the exhaust manifolds, which is one improvement over the Gen 4. These Gen 5 manifolds have little slits cut into them, so that the flange is not one piece that allows for the expansion and contraction without breaking the manifold bolts. I don't know if these do it yet. These are still pretty new. You know, I get to the other side, and we've got a broken exhaust manifold bolt. So apparently, not enough, guys. To get the left-hand manifold off, I need to contend with the dipstick tube. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. I'm going to get the manifold off first. This may have been a poor choice, much like milk. Why did I do it this way? Hey, look at that. Now I have hope this will just come right out. See, you just got to be hopeful. That's the way. Next, I'm going to clear the front of the engine off. We'll get this bracket and this water pump and housing off. I don't think I need the pan, right? It's not leaking yet. It's still not leaking.
Success.
The next first thing I'd like to do is remove the right-hand valve cover. Just give it a little tap. Well, everything in here seems pretty clean. I don't see anything horrible. I don't see any huge piles of metal. Not a ton of varnish. Nothing's broken. It looks good. Let's see what kind of chaos lies behind this valve cover. Just a little tap. Well, at first glance, I don't see anything. I expected to find some problems, but I don't see it. Let's give this thing a closer inspection. These engines are kind of notorious for breaking valve springs, but I don't see that in this case. I don't see anything broken. That's a bug. It looks pretty tidy in here. Before we go any further, I'm going to remove all of the high pressure fuel lines. I've heard that these are one-time use, that you can only use them once, or they're only installed at one at a time or something like that. Oh, hey, the fuel pump's off. There's the pump. Oh, we're leaking fuel. Now it's time to crap the rocker arms off. These don't have stands, they're cast into the head. So they are all the fun. I'll pull the push rods out. That doesn't look right. Look at the gradient of cleanliness. Super clean to super varnished. All the rocker arms look good. Not a ton of damage. One of these does have a little bit of damage. Right there. That one's got a little bit of a mark on the pad. Otherwise, these look pretty good. The push rods I can't figure out because these are beautiful. This one's disgusting. Nothing's bent. I rolled them all, so nothing's too torn up. And the ends all look good. Like it didn't have any oiling problems, but this, it looks like it's got some witness marks that cleaned it. I don't know, maybe, what do you guys think? Why is that one so dirty? Is that where crankcase ventilation comes in? Again, the inside of the head looks pretty good. I don't see anything terribly wrong. This valve, everything looks to be okay. The height of the valves looks pretty decent. All right, now it's time to remove the head bolts. This is an odd one. It has a hex-headed bolt. The front, I think that's just for packaging. They sure aren't quiet. Oh, I missed one. Oh no, I went out of order. All right, what's behind head number 1? Oh, I see. Well, the head gasket looks pretty good. We must first do science. That one's good. Good. I missed. Good. Gone. It's a strange game of duck, duck, goose. Wait a minute. Why can't I see the floor? I can see the floor. Well, normally I don't start at the back. It's usually bad practice, but the bore doesn't look great. As you move forward, I think this thing's got reined in at least once or twice. That bore looks pretty good. And this one, it's just gone. There's nothing left. And all this damage that you see, that's all from the wrist pin bouncing around, wreaking havoc. I'm sure it's in the bottom of the pan, one spray of brake clean away from being able to be reused, or it's orbiting the earth, one of the two. But that's really terrible. Broke all the way through. And then look at how beat up the rod ends are. It is awful. And that's what I mean by looking. Look, you can see the ground. That's the ground. And here's the cylinder head. Again, first 3 cylinders or last 3 cylinders look pretty good. And then this one has been hammer ported or forged or reshaped. It's it's bad. This clearly blew up at idle in the drive-thru on the way to church on a Sunday morning, or doing 90 miles an hour towing a trailer. One of those 2 scenarios is true. Now it's time to cram these rocker arms off. Uh-oh, that one's bad. Well, it's pretty apparent that one of the push rods has perished. It's a perished push rod. It is very bent, but I see some wear indicators on there. So is that from impact, from flailing debris inside the crankcase? Or is that from it being bent and trying to self-clearance itself while it was still running? The question is, was this engine still running when it came apart? The rest of these all look good. All the rocker arms look good. I don't see any major damage here. None of the bearings have fallen apart. Now it's time to crack the head bolts loose on the other head. They are really not tight. I wonder if someone's been in here. Now, we pull the head. Yep. It's time for some science. But first, we must do the test against my better judgment. And I've been eating really healthy lately, so I'm going to start at the back. Hey, perfect score, I think? Maybe? I think what I'm going to do next is I'm going to turn the engine over to make sure all of the pistons come to the top of the bore. That one does. That one does. That one does. Hey, I think we're okay here. Here's a look at the bores, and they're pretty dirty. I'll get this cleaned up when we get the rods and pistons out. But I can see some heavy gouges, really deep, ones that'll catch your whole hand. And that could just be from debris from this Catastrophic. It might have just been that. That's from moisture sitting where a piston was in one spot for a while. I think there's more of that in that cylinder. But I don't see a ton of damage. There's a little bit of debris on this piston. It's very wet. And that could have been how this engine was stored. In the head, there's a little bit of debris here. But I don't see any clear signs that valves struck pistons, which is really good, which means that likely that bent push rod happened from something flying around on the inside and not from a piston hitting a valve because the timing was off. I don't see any major damage here. Of course, these are going to have to go through the wash. Hopefully we get one good head out of this. The next thing we're going to remove is the VLOM, which stands for very likely and obvious malfunction, or valley lifter oil manifold. Will this come right off? No. Unlike Gen 4s, you got to pry this one off. Have any debris in here? Nothing super apparent. I'll be honest with you, I was expecting to find some chunks of piston up here, but all we have is some varnish, and it's not even a ton of it. And this is what the backside of the VLOM looks like. This is in charge of the active fuel management, which shuts down cylinders and turns them back on as needed. If you ask me, these are unneeded. Most people get rid of these. They are problematic, expensive, and when you combine these with the AFM lifters, only bad things can come of it. But this looks really good. I don't see any major damage here. I expected a bunch of debris in this area, but this looks like a great part. It's no water pump, but it goes to the same place. Now it's time to remove the lifters. Well, all of the lifters appear to be in okay condition. I wouldn't call them great because there's a little bit of damage to the rollers. But none of the AFM lifters are collapsed and none of the rollers have blown apart, which is a pretty common problem for these engines. More so the earlier ones, but these engines still eat these things alive. Next thing we're going to do is remove the high pressure fuel pump drive. There's that roller. Now it's time for the crank pulley. All right, this should work pretty good.
Woo! Almost got me.
Now we can remove the front cover. Now we need old Blue to help us with this cover removal. I remember the oil pump was kind of a thing with this. I don't remember what the thing was, so we're going to find out again. Did I miss a bolt? Ah, yes. The variable oil pump. I don't really know how this comes apart. Is this supposed to come out with the solenoid? I don't know. Oh, I think that connector comes off, but that is probably not going to help us, because that has to go that way. I can just let it dangle. That's professional. Oh, and I see some things. Ah, yes, things. I think what they want you to do is remove the pan before the front cover and then disconnect it there, which I don't do it that way. I also don't do things by the book because I'm just tearing down core engines to salvage parts. But there's a little bit of forbidden glitter right there. I don't see it in any other places, maybe a little bit right there. Either way, no huge carnage up here. Next, we'll unbolt the cam gear. Hopefully we can get this thing off. I think I'm going to have to turn it over to where this trigger wheel, I don't think there's enough slack. Yeah, let's turn this thing over. So I got this unbolted, got the engine turned over to where the trigger wheel has the most space here, and I just can't seem to get the chain off. I know I could cut the chain, but we don't treat chains like that on this channel. No, we don't. We try not to do that. Even if it is a short chain, I just can't seem to get this past it. I don't know what the magic trick is. I think what they want you to do is just take it apart from the bottom up like European engines. I can't do that. So we're just going to have to leave it like that and flip it over so we can pull the oil pan. I think that's next. So I've realized a slight problem. I would love to flip this over, but I'm pretty sure that that party basket on the bottom of this engine has a bunch of gifts for us that I really don't want to have to fish out of different parts of the engine. So I'm going to turn it over part of the way, and we're going to kind of pull it apart at an angle. So I thought about this 5 ways to Sunday, even though it's just Thursday, and I'm just going to unbolt this part. I think I can pull the pan with the lower pan attached. We'll remove this once it's off, because then we can at least take a look at the pickup screen behind this. But I don't want to be dropping parts. I just don't want to do that. I think I got them all. If I don't, I should have. I feel like I'm missing something over here on this corner. Let's start prying on it anyway. What are we going to do, break the block? That went perfectly.
I dropped my nuggets.
Oh, there's a lot. Well, this is utter wreckage. Look at the size of that piston nugget. Man, it is just destroyed. This looks like everything I need to put it back together. There's so many pieces of piston in here. That's piston. Ooh, there's something real good back here. How'd you get back there? I'm gonna have to take this oil pan apart. You know what? Let's just do that. Look at the impact marks on the sump tube, the windage tray. This thing was blasted. This piece has a few chunks of metal on it, but nothing like that. Oh my goodness. There's so much stuff in here that's not supposed to be here. There's a section of rod, very beefy. That's piston. It's a giant ring, banana phone. More rings. This is all giant and medium-sized. There is something missing. I don't see it, guys. I don't see them. Where did they go? Oh no. What are we going to do without our wrist pins? You know, I'm just going to hope we find them in the rest of the block. I'm going to fish the rest of these parts out for about 30 minutes, and we'll get them cleaned up, and I'll show you everything. This is the state of the sump. We've got big pieces, little pieces, all species of pieces. Oh, hey, look, a circlip. This is pretty broken up. I'm sure they didn't hear it at all. And another circlip. Sneaky. Instead of pulling the lower pan, we're just going to remove the sump. I think we can do this. That didn't take a lot. What's lurking in here? Oh, there's some stuff. That doesn't go there. This is what we've got. We've got a large piston nugget meal. And look at how that looks. It's almost unrecognizable. If it wasn't for this, where the wrist pin sits, you can kind of make out the ring lands. This is almost entirely piston. And this is all from just the one, I guess. Bottom section. I could almost put this back together. There's our rings. There's our circlips. And then there's our section of rod. There's the lower end. That's the top end. I don't know where the rest of this is. And I have a very bad feeling about it. We still have our powder in the pan. Pan powder. Not a good thing. I loosely installed this back on just so that it wasn't dangling by the wire. And I suppose I should disconnect this here. So yes, now we can remove the front cover. I wish they would just put a disconnect like on the inside right here. Now for the great reveal. Let's see how bad this thing is. Oh, we're leaking and we're missing the pan. Well, it's not good. Did we expect it to be? There's a lot of carnage in this area. The block is the worst. Obviously, we're missing some components, a lot of components. But as you get towards the back, nope, there's still evidence of a fight. This is the only area of solace. It looks unaffected. Maybe we get some good rods and pistons out of the back of this. Maybe just 2. Now we can remove this oil pump. And before we take the oil pump apart, we're going to get this cam gear and chain off. I think. Still having trouble? Why? There we go. There's that and that. And now we need a T40 so we can pull that cam plate. Now it's time to pull the camshaft. I said it's trying to pull the camshaft. No. No. We moved it. It is not wanting it to move. Oh, we're getting somewhere. That's good for it. It's really tight in there. Ooh, those cam bearings feel the wrong kind of tight. I'm pulling this out in a way you should never pull a camshaft, just so you guys know. This is bad. Don't do this way. Do not follow my lead. Unless, of course, your engine looks as bad as this, then have at it. It's going to come out. Let's take a look at the cam. And there is some wear, but what is most concerning are the journals of the camshaft where they sit in the cam bearings. It was tight coming out of there. And look at the marks. This was not an easy one to get out. So there's some wear to that cam bearing, but the one behind it, I don't know if you guys can see that. That's pretty rough. It looks pretty rough all the way back. If I get a better vantage point at that once this engine's all the way torn down, I'll show you guys. Now it's time to pull this contraption apart. Oh. And then this comes off of this somehow. It's all on this pin right here. Can I pull it all off at once? Does it work that way? It doesn't want to work that way, but it's coming out. Okay, so there's rear housing. Here's the variable part. Oops. Oops. That's fine. That spring looks really dangerous. I need to defuse the situation. So let's take a look at this thing. There's a few pieces here. One of them is still orbiting somewhere around the shop, but all of these little veins, they have quite a bit of wear. But what is more concerning is this. There's definitely been some material run through here that's foreign for the oil pump, which means we need to check the sump because we haven't done that yet. It is right here. And would you look at that? That's hardly a place to store extra engine parts. Ooh, it's a Morocco. Will you come out of there? Maybe I'm just not doing it hard enough. No, that was definitely hard enough. Either way, there's quite a bit of material in there. Oh, here, we're losing some. Maybe the wrist pin's in here. Nope. Regardless, because that is not super fine, the finer metal made it through the sump and did the damage to that housing. And not a ton of wear to that. But all these guys have quite a bit of wear. Now I'm going to turn this thing over so we can try to get the rods and pistons out. I'm going to start at the front even though... Oh, wow. That's bad. So that's probably the start of the problem. We'll get to that in a minute, but we need to figure out a way to get those remnants of bolts out. Those have been misshapen. They were 11 millimeter headed bolts. Oh, that one's going to require a hammer. Let's do the hard one first. I'm getting wiser. Will it? Can it?
Yeah.
Can I have my socket back? This one will come off. Now just for grins, we feel like fighting it, so I think we can do this. Very good. This one's very bad. Let's see if the old vice grip trick works. Yeah. Oh, that's shaped funny. Zip these on out. All right, we just got one. First one to come out. Let's see, will it come out easy? Now we're going to rotate this to get the next two, see if we can go backwards. Yeah. Come on. Eve. Time for the next two. I didn't need that. And the final two. Now I need to take the engine mounts off the block so I have access to the main cap bolts. Now we can unbolt the main caps. Need a little help from our friend Blue here. Now, can I get the crank past this? I'm going to go with no. Can I get the crank out with that? Maybe. Nope. Idea, unbolt top bolts from engine stand and hope it doesn't fall on the ground. Did that do anything for me? That might have helped me. This is really less than ideal. I think we can come out now. Yes. We can get the crank. We can definitely get the crank out now. Definitely don't want to hurt it, so I got to be careful. Well, I thought I could. Let's just hope we can get the crank out. Probably should have pulled that rear plate before I put this on the stand. Let's start out with the rod bearings. We're going to start at the back. I know that's not really the best way, but they all have a little bit of damage, and it gets worse as you get towards the front of the engine. These are all pretty consistent, and then these are just, they're just not there. The rods and pistons, most of the coating is gone, and look at the amount of carbon buildup on these things. I didn't see any major damage. I will say the wrist pins don't feel great on these. And that could just be a bunch of carbon oil deposits in there. There's not a lot of vertical wear. It's just the coating that's gone. I didn't see any damage to any of the crowns. Okay, we're getting a little bit of damage there. That's no bueno. Also, worth mentioning, a couple of these rods took some serious blows. There's some dings on the pistons as well. I think I may have one or two sellable rods and pistons here, which, I mean, I'll take it. Obviously, if you want one for your desk, I'll sell all of them. Whatever you guys want. Everything in these videos is for sale unless it's sometimes my stuff. You know when it's my stuff. That one's pretty tore up. This is the neighbor to the one that exploded, and look at the bearing on that one. It's fused. Of course, the bolts were distorted, so I got lucky on those. This one I had to use a vice grip on, and I can't even get that back together. That is all egg-shaped. There's the rod, and there's the piston. It's kind of an exploded view. And this is everything that was in the pan. Not everything, but this is all the larger stuff that was in the pan. That's a lot of material for one piston, but these are very thick pistons. There's a lot of meat here. That's pretty contorted. And the saddest part of this all is, well, I just hope our buddy wrist pin is out there chooching away in some other L86 or L83. Main bearings, as you'd expect, considerable amounts of wear. Most of the coating is gone on the lower shells. And the crankshaft was a war hammer in this situation. It was absolutely annihilated. Look at how many impact marks there are. Obviously, we've seen much worse, but it's still impressive. And this is the worst damage to it. You can see this is the cylinder that deleted a rod bearing. And when it does that, it allows the piston or the bottom of the connecting rod to bounce around on the journal. And ultimately, it allowed that piston to come up and smack the cylinder head, which likely shattered that piston and caused all this carnage. That's what wrecked this entire engine. Obviously, this thing has signs that it had metal material, the wrong material in the oil. It was starved of oil or dirty oil. This was an oiling failure for sure. Bottom of the block, she's beat up pretty bad. This one's going to the great scrap bin in the sky. I mean, it's over there, but that's where it's going because this is nothing but scrap. Let's get a better look at these bores. They're not awful. They're not wonderful. Most of this is just from the engine sitting in one position and some moisture sitting in here. That one's got a bit of wear right there. And that's where the deep gouges are. Those are very deep. But not quite as deep as that. That's, yeah, that's about as deep as it can get because it's already broken into the water jacket through the bore and sleeve. The rest of these don't look too bad. It's just time and moisture that did these in. I have one big question related to this engine's failure, and that is how much oil was in the engine when it blew up, because this engine seemed to be pretty well maintained. There wasn't a ton of varnish anywhere in the engine, a little bit, but not awful. And I've seen these engines when they get neglected. They look much worse than this. This also didn't appear to be a super high mileage engine. It's not that old. Not that it couldn't have a ton of miles, but it didn't seem that crazy. What was crazy to me is that it deleted a rod bearing, yet it still had enough oil in it to put metal and put debris into the sump. So that tells me the oil level was above the sump, but it still had an oil pressure related issue. So did some material clog a passage to the crankshaft journals that kept them from being lubricated, or was there another failure with the oil pump? Was there enough oil in it, but the variable oil pump just was like, nah, you don't need that oil pressure, and it actually did need it. We all know what happens after that, though. Since it destroyed a rod bearing, it allows the piston to come up in the cylinder head or in the cylinder bore and strike the cylinder head repeatedly at high RPM. I'm sure it was knocking, making all kinds of racket, low oil pressure warnings in the dash. You have to ignore all of those things and try to power through them, and engines typically don't fix themselves. This one did, and hey, at least we know the wrist pin is out there somewhere. Probably got its toes in the sand, enjoying life. The rest of the engine, well, I got a cylinder head out of it and an intake that I shouldn't sell because it's full of metal. So I got a cylinder head out of it and a set of rocker arms. Yeah, because everything else is pretty much damaged in this engine. A couple rods and pistons if I'm lucky. So why are these engines so expensive? Why are used engines worth $6,500? Why is the core charge $1,100 to $1,300 depending on what it is? And I can answer that pretty easily. These engines are on intergalactic planetary back order. They are literally 3 to 6 months behind at all times. And I'm talking about the L86, the Gen 5, and the generation after that are even worse. Those things are launching sections of crankshafts out of the bottom end. I've seen pictures where the crankshafts are broken in between main journals. That's incredible to me. I don't know if it's a tolerance issue, but I am trying to get my hands on some of those engines. Unfortunately, the dealerships, they all need to go back to the manufacturer, which is usually what happens on these late model engines. I can't get them because they usually go back to the manufacturer. In this case, these L86 engines there's a lot of demand for them. They don't all blow up. If you treat them right, they're usually okay. But if you treat them right, sometimes they're not okay. And sometimes if you treat them poorly, they're still okay. Sometimes it's luck. Sometimes it's the machining tolerances. I wish I had a concrete answer for you. The lifters fail. I've seen lifter trays fail, turn the lifter sideways, and then they shave the lifter down. I've obviously seen this problem. Lots of broken valve springs. There's not just like one culprit with these engines. It's a plethora of problems, but I still don't think they're terrible engines. I just think that with 400 and something horsepower, when they fail, things get sideways pretty quick. So I hope you enjoyed this teardown. If you'd like to buy any parts out of this engine or anything else I've torn down, not this, no. Anything else that I've had videos on, not this, you can go to Importapart.com and peruse our inventory. I've been uploading our parts cards every single week. And if you don't see what you're looking for on the website, you can always shoot us an email at sales@Importapart.com. I really appreciate you watching this video. As always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one.